In an earlier video, I showed you how to use the new class JavaScript feature to write classes and create objects from classes. In this video, I'm going to delve into classes just a little bit more and show you how to use inheritance with classes, how to write classes that extend other classes. And we'll do that using our dog example again. So here I have a class dog, and it has a constructor that takes a name, a breed, and a weight, and we assign those two properties here in the constructor, and then we also adding a sitting property. And so these are the properties that get added to instances of objects that we create from the dog class. And then below that, we have the properties and methods that are being added to the prototype. In other words, the object that dogs will inherit from. So, for instance, we have the species property. So you can see we know that this is a prototype property because we're using the get keyword in front of the function here. And then we also have a bark method, a run method, a wag method, and a sit method that are all being added to the dog prototype. So if we go into the JavaScript console and we look at dog, we see that it's a class. And if we look at the dog prototype, which is the object that all dogs we create from this class will inherit from, we can see those methods and the species property that we added to the prototype with this code. And all of this is described in the previous video. So now I can create dog objects using the dog class. So we can take a look at Fido. And we see that Fido is a dog, has a name, a breed, a weight. And we can also see that it inherits from an object, and that object is the dog prototype. So that's where we find the bark method, the run method, the sit method, and so on. It's also where we find that species prototype property. And you can see that this part of the display here is matching the dog prototype because that is what the Fido object is inheriting from. So that means I can call fido.bark. And it works because it's calling the method bark in the prototype object that Fido is inheriting from. Now, if I want to, I can override methods in a dog instance. So here we have Spot. Spot was created using the dog class. Let's say we want Spot to bark a little differently from the other dogs. Well, we can override the bark method that Spot is inheriting from the prototype by specifying our own method for bark in Spot. So here, I'm just setting spot.bark to a method that's going to bark a little differently. So if I try spot.bark, you'll see that Spot does indeed bark differently from Fido. And if we take a look at Spot, we can see that Spot is a dog. Spot was created using the dog class. But you can see that it's got a bark method in the instance object. So it's the bark method that's in the prototype, that dog.prototype object is being overridden by the bark method that's in the Spot instance. So that's how basic object inheritance works with a class. Now let's say we want to extend the dog class with a new class showdog. Well, with the new class feature in JavaScript, we can use the extends keyword here. So we write class showdog extends dog. So that means that showdog is automatically going to be set up correctly to inherit from dog. Now, if you remember, the way that we used to have to do this in JavaScript was that we used to have to set the prototype object explicitly. And so we would create a new dog object and set that as the prototype for showdog. Well, now this extends feature is going to do that for you. So you don't have to worry about doing that. In showdog, we create a constructor, and it's going to have the name, breed, and weight that we gave to dog because a showdog is a dog, so we still need to have those three properties. And then we have an additional property for a showdog called handler. So we take those four pieces in the constructor, and then we can use the dog constructor to handle setting the name, breed, and weight values in the instance by calling super. And so if we say super, what that's going to do is call the constructor from dog. and set this name, breed, and weight, which we pass in, as well as the sitting property. And then in the show dog constructor is where we're also setting that handler property, which is unique for show dogs. Then what we do is we add a bunch of methods and a property to the prototype for show dog. Well, remember that the prototype for show dog is a dog object. So we're adding these properties and methods to the prototype object. So all show dogs that we create from this class will inherit these properties and methods. So down here, I'm creating two show dogs, Scotty and Beatrice. And notice that I'm passing in the name, the breed, the weight, as well as a handler because it's a show dog. So let's take a look at Scotty. And we can see that Scotty is indeed a show dog. Scotty was made from the show dog class. If we look inside it, we see that Scotty has the breed, the name, the weight, as well as a handler, and of course that sitting property. So the name, the breed, the weight, and the sitting properties were all set with the dog constructor, and then the handler was set with the show dog constructor. But they all get set in the instance of Scotty. So Scotty is an instance of show dog, which is also a dog because it's inheriting from dog. Now let's take a look at the prototype for Scotty. Now remember that Scotty has a prototype object, and that prototype object is the show dog prototype. And if you take a look, that prototype object is a dog object. And that's where we can find all of those prototype methods and properties that we added to our show dog. So we see examine, we see stack, we see gate, we see groom, and we see league. And those were all of the prototype properties and methods that we added to show dog. So let's take a look at show dog.prototype. And that's where you'll find all of those methods and properties. And notice that the type of the show dog.prototype is dog. And that's exactly right, because show dog is extending dog. If we take a look at the prototype for the show dog prototype object, we see all of those methods that were added to the dog prototype. So the show dog prototype is inheriting from the dog prototype. So that's how we get all of those methods and properties available to show dogs, both the ones from the show dog class as well as the ones from the dog class. So for Scotty, I can call gate. Oops, I have to pass a kind of gate. There we go. And I can call Scotty.groom. And I can call Scotty.bark. Now remember, it's inheriting bark from the dog prototype. And so we get the right behavior there. Now I can override the bark method in Scotty if I want to, just like we did in Spot, by adding a bark method to the Scotty instance. So you can continue to override any methods that you're inheriting either from the show dog prototype or the dog prototype, just by setting those methods and properties in the instance object that you have. In this case, that's Scotty. So it's a good idea to start getting used to this new syntax for creating objects in JavaScript. You'll find that libraries are starting to use it. A good example of that is React.js. You'll find a lot of code out there that shows you how to create React components by extending React classes. So you'll need to understand how classes work, how constructors work, how extending works, how super works, and how prototypes work. If you need a refresher on the basics of JavaScript's prototypal inheritance, then check out Headfirst JavaScript Programming. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.